Cops of Reddit, what situation did you respond to, only to find out it was the biggest waste of time ever? Story 1. Former cop, I was dispatched to a burglary in progress. A lady called and said she was locked inside her bedroom and people were rummaging through her living room of her apartment. She is hysterical and begging for us to rescue her. I mean, she's beyond frantic, so me and my partner are racing there as fast as possible. Lights and sirens, hoping to get there before she is brutally murdered. We get there, surround the apartment, and I'm about to kick the door in. Then the door opens and the lady is standing there with the most embarrassed look on her face, hair a mess, disheveled pajamas. She forgot that she decided it was hot and opened her balcony door, which created the desired breeze she wanted, and blew some papers off her coffee table. That was it, the wind. TLDR, dispatched to burglary in progress. Lady is hysterical, turns out the wind blew papers off a table. Story 2. I'm a dispatcher, not a cop, but I once had to send an officer out to Alada's house because she had left town that morning and suddenly couldn't remember if she had closed her refrigerator door before she left. The call came in at like 1 a.m. and she wanted us to send someone out to look in her windows to see if the fridge was closed and possibly break in to close it if it was open, to which we said no way. An officer was sent. The fridge was, in fact, closed. Story 3. Oh boy, I'm not a cop anymore due to medical reasons, but it's hard answering this question with only one story. I'll try make this short. We went out to this house on a domestic because a woman and her husband were getting into it and arguing. They said they weren't physically fighting, but when I got there I thought differently because of the amount of thrown all over the place. The male half had some bleeding above his eye. So I'm talking to them and of course they're giving me conflicting stories like they always do, and the woman says something along the lines of, I just had it, I snapped and threw the fan at his face. Now this is one of those big fans with maybe like a 4-foot pole as a stand, used usually for an entire room, can't think of what they're called right now. She said that when they were arguing she went into the living room to get away from her husband, sit down, and cool off, but the dude comes over with the fan, positions it next to her face, turns it on, and proceeds to into the fan, so she flipped. I look at the dude and he's just kind of standing there, giving me that face of guilt like he's acknowledging the fact that I'm judging him, but he's too embarrassed to vocally admit he did in fact into the fan to off his wife. Firstly, they were both in the late 30s, and this was the reason why I'm at their place. Secondly, she just admitted to assaulting her husband, so unfortunately she's got to go to jail. I wouldn't say that the call itself was a waste of time. It was a genuine domestic with an offense we could charge, but the circumstances that led up to it were stupid. So next time it takes them forever to get to your house for your theft report or whatever, remember that people like them exist and keep us busy. Edit. Thank you for that shiny precious gold. Story 4. Not a very long or crazy one, but today I responded to a woman locked out of her vehicle. Took me quite some time to get across town, find her in the giant mall parking lot, etc. The woman is crying hysterically when I get there about how scared she is about never being able to drive her car again. I calm her down, take a look at the car, and open the passenger door. Just open it. She only locked the driver door on accident and didn't try any of the other doors to open the car. Story 5. Dealt with the same couple for about a year. They would call any time they were mad at each other and then lay out their full exploits. But they were mundane. She takes pens from the bank, he speeds on Main Street she had with 17-year-old when she was 18. No assault ever occurred, no abuse. Just two people who didn't know how to break up and wanted us to fix it for them. Story 6. I'll post my brown goo story again. I'm a reserve deputy now, but in the past I was an intern for my hometown's police department for 2 summers. I saw a lot of calls that ended up being wastes of time, but this one was special. The officer I was with got called to deal with a family issue involving a minor and some healthcare type stuff, so I stayed in the car listening to the radio. With things like that, sometimes it was better I gave the family some privacy. There were 3 other officers on that day. One was being trained by the field training officer, so they rode together. The other had his own car. Anyway, I'm sitting listening to music, and a call comes out. If any of you recognize this, I forgot numbers exactly what was said. The call was along the lines of 323 City Dispatch. Can you head to address? Caller is advising there is a brown goo in his alley. Silence. Dispatch. 323, brown goo. 10-4. He says it smells bad. Alright, I'm still in the car waiting for my officer to get back, because I want to go see what this mystery goo is. More voices on the radio. Dispatch. 323, I'm 10-23 on scene. There's definitely brown goo. It definitely smells bad. And more voices. Dispatch. 316 and 324 are going to be out at address investigating that goo as well. The FTO had brought his trainee along. My officer hurries back to the car and we decide we need to also investigate this goo. We get to the address and pull into the alleyway. Now the entire city's police force is sitting in this tiny alleyway talking to the homeowner caller. In the grass between the gravel of the alleyway and the back of the caller's garage is this foamy brown goo. It was baking in the summer sun, and smelled like a combination of roadkill and a ham and cheese sandwich that had been left sitting in a hot car for about a week. We all stood around making jokes for a while before a sheriff's deputy joined the fun. I poked the goo with a stick, which didn't do much more than release more bad smells. The caller had a rake, which only spread the goo around further. The FTO got this dumb smile on his face and said, you know, this seems more like a fire department issue. He got on his radio. Dispatch. Can you start fire to our location? For the goo. 316. Dispatch. 10-4. A few seconds later we hear a fire page series of tones unique to each department in the county go out over the radio and start laughing. In about 3 minutes, 2 firefighters show up in basically a big Ford F-350 with some rescue gear on it. They get out, demand to know why we called them, and then also start poking at the goo. They start to smile. One of them says, "We don't have any water on this truck." The other firefighter starts laughing, and the first picks up his radio, "Start an engine to address." They back their truck out of the alley. Finally the engine shows up with 4 firefighters on board and the lights flashing. The driver actually pulls this giant truck into the narrow alley, and drives up to where we were gathered around the goo. They get out and walk up to us. "Why are we here?" Officer points to goo. First 2 firefighters laugh. "What is it?" We dunno. "Goddamn, it smells bad." Yes, it does." The firefighters sit for a moment in silence. "We could hose it down maybe." We tell them that they 100 should hose down this goo. The homeowner caller agrees. The firefighters unload a hose and attach it to the front of the engine. They tell us to stand back, then blast the ever-loving out of this rancid mystery goo. They send goo and gravel alike flying into this poor man's yard, coating his garage with it. Now everyone but the firefighter manning the hose is laughing, even the homeowner. As the firefighters packed up their hose, we decided there was no more protecting and or serving to do, so we headed back for our cars. As we were leaving, one of the officers turned to the homeowner and said, "Remember, this is the fire department's fault," and everyone laughed again. This all took maybe 25 minutes at most. Such are the joys of small-town policing. Story 7. I responded to assault in progress in an alley. Caller said she heard grunting and what sounded like woman yelling for help. Dispatch alert toned the call and I went all out to get there as fast as possible. When I pulled into the alley, brakes were smoking and I was ready to kick some. I jumped out of the car and ran to the sounds, which were still intense and close by. I rounded the corner to find 2 raccoons straight up duking it out. I'm talking squared off, throwing punches, etc. It sounded terrible, but it was awesome to watch. Story 8. Cop here. Honestly, 95 of calls. There are just too many to pick an example. The biggest reason is that people think our job is general problem solving. Having an argument with your roommate, just call the police. They'll take your side so you can win the argument. Everyone knows that we automatically have to be on the side of the 911 caller. See a guy walking down the street. Well, since you've never seen him before, call the police just to check it out and make sure he's not a murderer. Story 9. I was the caller that time. My landlord owned the house next door, but it had been empty for over a year. One night I saw a light randomly bobbing around inside the house. No other lights were on, nobody in the driveway. Knowing the house was empty, and knowing the landlord would use the room lights and not a flashlight, I called the cops. I was in an upscale neighborhood. They responded within 3 to 4 minutes. Turned out to be headlights hitting a window just enough to imitate someone with a flashlight. On a brighter note, the woman officer who responded was really hot. Story 10. Police dispatcher here, and I would have to answer this with a simple 23 of the calls that come in are a waste of time, but we have to entertain them. I have 2 that come to mind. First was an older lady calling BC during the winter. The neighbor's snowplow driver was pushing the snow onto her lawn and she didn't want the extra snow on her grass. Second, and this happens kind of frequently, is for the black person walking down the street. And apparently this black person shouldn't be here. BC, they live in an upscale area and don't see these kind of people around here, and this is on top of all the domestics that are basically calling for a cop to come babysit them and make it right. Story 11. I was the dumb caller. I was home alone in my dad's house when I smelled gas from my room. I went to the stove to find out it had been on, and I turned it off. Everything still smelled like gas, so I hid outside and googled house smells like gas, which of course turned up results like there's a gas leak, call the cops. Now I called the cops, and I actually forgot my address and they had to find me. When they did show up, they couldn't find any gas because ID opened all the windows. I was feeling pretty embarrassed for wasting their time at this point, but then it got worse. I was a minor, and after calling I found out they couldn't legally let me go without an adult to take custody of me, or they could discharge me to a hospital. I tried calling my dad, but he wouldn't pick up the phone. My sibling who lives with me wouldn't either. The only person who answered was my sibling who lived 30 minutes away, so an ambulance and a cop car had to wait with me for 30 minutes because I freaked out over a stove. The morning after, my dad texted my sister asking where I was. Story 12. Not a cop, but this reminds me of what happened at my friend's high school. It was a Chicago public school, so it wasn't that great for the most part, and there were many fights that broke out all the time. A bunch of students one day decided to pull a prank where they pretended a fight was going on. They played 2 soda cans in the middle of the hall and formed a huge circle around it and started screaming, "Fight, fight, fight." The security guards came running, breaking their way through the thick wall of kids and found the 2 soda cans just sitting there on the ground. Story 13. I don't know if it's boring enough to be a waste of time, but I was doing a ride along with an officer and we responded to a call that was reported as a drive-by. Ambulance hauled off the victim, shot in the leg, and 10 cruisers were canvassing the area for the supposed blood trail when the guy claimed to have limped to his apartment. Ladies and gents, play back that 911 call. A woman called, muffled out, "What do I tell them?" To which someone replied, "Say he got shot by someone." This was overspoken by the dispatcher spiel, so it was missed by the dispatcher. Yep, 10 cars of wasted time for a guy that later admitted to messing around with a loaded gun and shooting himself. Caught falsifying a report and an impeding charge just for the of it due to 2 hours of wasted time, all trying to save his dignity. Story 14 was en route to a domestic argument between husband and wife called in by a neighbor. Screams, swearing, hitting. arrived to a dude in his boxers by himself watching Game of Thrones on his surround sound. Story 15. One day, I came home fairly late and noticed my car had been recently egged. I washed it off. But on a whim, I walked up the street and noticed that car had been egged too. I walk up and see two more. It's 2:30 a.m. What to do? Wake up the owners. I call the cops and tell them that I need to walk up the street with a flashlight and wash all the cars. And I'm not trying to break into them, but it looks like lots of cars have been egged, so I don't know how far I'll need to go. It's obvious the eggers are long gone. So if they get reports of a suspicious person, it's just me. I felt like an idiot. Cop showed up and paced me the whole time with his car just to make sure no one shot me or anything. I washed about a dozen cars. I guess they just ran out of eggs. Story 16. Not a cop, but I bet they thought a call my friends and I made was really stupid when it came in. When I was around 13, I was staying at my friend's house with two other people. One girl somehow got her hand stuck in the garbage disposal. We tried everything we could think of to get it out: ice, hot water, cold water, oil, and a lot of other things. We were there alone, and this was before cell phones were popular, so we couldn't get a hold of any of our parents. After I think about 2 hours, we ran out of ideas and called the cops. They asked us a load of questions before finally sending out a cop. Cop showed up, realized it was legit, had no idea how to free her hand, and called for backup. 3 more cops and a fire truck later, her hand was freed. Story 17. Not a cop or a firefighter. However, my parents live across from an older lady who is the self-proclaimed neighborhood watch. She has called the non-emergency line for the local police station so many times that she is not allowed to call that line anymore. The only way she can get a hold of the police is to either call 911 in an extreme emergency or actually drive to the police station to make a complaint. This woman is a terror to their neighborhood. She reports to the cops the most useless. My favorite complaint that she has ever made was the time that 2 stray cats were doing it in her driveway. This woman took pictures and a video of the 2 cats doing their thing instead of going out there and trying to get rid of them herself. She printed out the pictures, put the video on a CD, and brought it to the police station the next day. Obviously, the police couldn't do anything about it. The best part of this story is the one cop that she complained to put up the picture in the common room so everyone could have a good laugh at it. We know this part because my parents have become really good friends with the cops over the years of living across from her. Story 18. My fiancé is a cop and told me a story about someone calling the police because they were locked out of their house. Upon arriving to this ridiculous call, who on earth calls 911 and not a locksmith? It turned out that they were not locked out of their house, but rather they were locked out of the bedroom. There was no child or pet or hazardous item that was locked in the bedroom. They calmly explained to this person that being locked out of your bedroom is not a police matter and advised that they call a locksmith. Story 19. Not a cop, but the cop did say, well, this was a waste of my time, so it's probably close enough. I used to work at a horseboard barn, a couple big barns, a few pastures, and we had a 16-acre pasture across the street that we turned broodmares and retire horses out on. One day after lunch I walk out and there is a cop car sitting in the driveway. I sort of blink at it a bit and wonder if the cop is going to get out and come up to the gate or something. It was kinda surreal. Finally decide I should go out and ask if I could help him with something. The first thing he says to me is, I'm pretty sure this is a waste of my time. Turns out someone called in and said we had 2 skinny horses in a mudlot, with no access to water, and they were pretty sure one was dead already. I just looked around at the probably a bit too plump, if I'm honest, happy horses wandering around the pastures, which were admittedly muddy, because it rained, and shrugged. The cop just shook his head and told me to have a good day. Also, just a general PSA, horses will sleep laying down. If you see a horse laying down, don't be too concerned. Yes, they will look dead. Watch to see if they take a breath. Respirations, only about 10 breaths a minute. Story 20. Not a cop or a fireman, but one day I put too much oil in my lawnmower. It ran, but it was burning all the oil off and made a gigantic thick cloud of smoke that engulfed my house along with the neighbors. I got done cutting, put the mower away, and started to walk out of my backyard, where I met a very curious firefighter trying to look into one of my side windows. I asked him what's up. He asked back, fire, and I said lawnmower. He was like, oh, okay, turns around and leaves. I follow him out to the front of the house to find the house crawling with firefighters and cops, as well as like 4 very large fire trucks, all ready to spray a house fire. The curious firefighter just yells it was a lawnmower, and they were all gone in 3 minutes. Best day ever. Story 21. Not a cop but a retail manager. Had a customer call the cops because his appliances were on backorder, and there was nothing I could do to make Samsung get them to us any faster. He had the cop come to the store to force me to do something. The cop was visibly bored and asked me what's going on, and then said, well, he has obviously singed everything he can, and it looks like you either need to wait or cancel the order. Customer waited another week or so until delivery. Story 22. Not a cop, but had a woman call the police on me for not turning the air conditioner down at the restaurant I was working at. It was locked. I didn't have the key. Key holder was owner, who was out of town. Called and said I was trying to assault her by heat. No lie, cops showed up. Heard 30 seconds of her story. Looked at me and told me to tell her to leave and never come back, and they would happily come back to enforce her ban if she ever tried to come back in. By the way, it was July in Arkansas, 101 degrees with 90 humidity, no air conditioner, my big sweaty. Story 23. Not a cop, but heard a story from my friend who was one. Someone called for a flock of suspicious birds in their front yard. When he showed up, the birds were gone. Story 24. Not a cop, but the time on live PD when cops responded to a suspicious package at a post office. They used a robot to retrieve it and everything. It was a box of. Story 25. Still a cop. Generally the wealthier district is where the dumbest calls come from. I was once dispatched to a call in said district where a woman was locked inside of her car. The driver door wouldn't open. However, literally every other door would. She wasn't particularly out of shape. She just didn't put it together that she could crawl out the passenger side. At first I thought she was intoxicated, but after talking to her a bit I realized she just wasn't very bright. Story 26. What I'm sure would qualify. I was at the store when my dog escaped. Tried to play with the neighborhood kids. Knocked one down. And when they tried to put her back in the house they set off my alarm. So the police got the alarm and a child bitten by a dog call at the same address at the same time. When I got back the alarm company called me. I found 4 cop cars. All that fuss for a pup who wriggled under the fence. She was thrilled with all the excitement. I'm eternally grateful that the kid's mom saw her kid get knocked down and confirmed for the cops there was no biting. I'm certain that rated up there on the stupid meter for them. Story 27. Not police. But I used to live in an extremely small town. Someone called to report a skunk in their yard. 3 fire trucks and an ambulance were dispatched. I'm serious. Also, my next-door neighbor sold pot before it was legal in our state. He got into a huge screaming match with his girlfriend. I poked my head out to see what was going on and he was screaming for help and that he was bleeding. Naturally, I called 911. So he didn't bleed to death. The police arrived. He was not bleeding. Later, he admitted he was being a little because his girlfriend locked him out. And finally, my grandma's toilet broke and was making noise. She called 911 so they could check the house for intruders. Story 28. Throwing in a not a but story. I used to work in a small neighborhood bar and I would work alone at night. Whenever I had to kick out middle-aged drunk men causing trouble they always threatened to call the cops on me. I always laughed and said go ahead, please call the cops and let them know you're intoxicated, trespassing and probably driving, and let me know how that works out for you. Weirdly the police never showed up after they left. Sometimes I would say I'm calling them too and pick up the phone and pretend to call. Dummies. Story 29. When I was 6 I was mad at my dad so I locked myself in my room and called the police. Hung up the second I heard a voice on the other line, but they dispatched 2 officers anyway. They show up at the front door, much to my dad's confusion. Come into my room and say something along the lines of hi there, you okay, did you call by accident, have a good night. Then I ran and cried and said sorry to my dad because I thought he was going to go to jail, so I imagine those cops were fairly bored with that giant waste of time. Story 30. Not an officer. But about 12 years ago, my teenage brother and mother were watching my 3-year-old daughter during the summer. They bought a small plastic pool for her to swim in. She loved it so much that she was squealing with delight in the backyard. The neighbors called the police saying someone was beating a child and she was screaming in my mother's backyard. Everyone got a huge laugh out of it when it was exposed that an infant was swimming for the first time. Story 31. I got a flat, and someone called the police to check out the suspicious car that earned me a cop, fire truck and an ambulance while I was swapping out my flat. Story 32. Bangladeshi guy working as a trash collector called us and started accusing his 2 co-workers of stealing all his from his locker. The awkward part was he couldn't speak English, so he had to get his co-workers, the ones he was accusing, to translate for him. So he said an iPhone, a Samsung Galaxy S something, an iPad and a Watt of 500 was missing from his locker. When did he notice they were missing? Yesterday. When did he last see those items? 2 weeks ago. Was the lock broken? No, he doesn't keep his locker locked. How many people can access the locker room? Locker room is not locked at all. Anyone can walk in. I mean really, anyway we just stand there and listen to him burn probably the only bridges he has for about 30 minutes. As we try to tell him in the most inoffensive way possible that he's really just an idiot and we can't help him. Finally he gets frustrated and just sighs and says thank you officers and walks off. Story 33. I'm not a cop, but I am a hospital security officer. One day I heard the hospital operator page a code white security assistance to one of the floors, when me, 3 other officers, and half of the staff on the floor get there to see what the problem is. All the guy said was the night looks nice. Can one of you clean my window off? Needless to say we cleaned the out of that window. Story 34. Went to a parking dispute. Turns out the manager of the restaurant wanted the employees to park in the back. Employees said they weren't parking back there because it's poorly lit, so apparently they needed a cop there. I told the manager that if her employees didn't listen to fire them. I went out to the employees and told them if they really wanted to park out front to quit their jobs, then they could park out there all day if they wanted to. Story 35. Obligatory. Not a cop, but I work at a bank and we had a guy call 911 from the lobby and report that he had been robbed because we had been served a garnishment on his accounts and we were not legally able to just give him the money back. Then we got to call the police and say, hey, I know you were getting a call about a robbery at our bank, but here's what is actually happening. Story 36. Got a domestic dispute for 2 deaf people. Hilarious. Watching them sign cussing each other out was the highlight of my week. My dad used to tell a story about a lady who would call in to dispatch fairly regularly, weekly or monthly. I forget which, complaining of monkeys overrunning her house. My dad would arrive. Of course there were no monkeys. The lady had some sort of mental issues, but she would point out where she saw them, and he would dutifully chase them from the house until she said he got them all. Story 37. Obligatory. Not a cop. My brother became a cop later in life. Before that he was a mechanic and owned his own small business in the town he lived in and later became a cop in. He sold his business once he became a cop, and during his first couple months on duty a call came in because someone's car had broken down on the side of the road. I bet you can guess where this is going. The dispatcher asked if they were hurt or in any danger. No, my car just broke down. Can you send Officer Brother's last name to come take a look at it? He's my mechanic. Technically, it wasn't something he responded to. I don't think he was even on duty that day. But definitely don't call 911 to come take a look at your car. He got a lot for it at work the next day. Story 38 Heard police get sent in one of the towns I work in for an eaglehawk that was trying to eat her dog that was outside. I'm not sure what she expected. Cops to shoot it. Story 39 Not a stupid call but worth reading. Sorry, I know it's just interesting and haven't found a post similar to this one yet to post it, so I thought I'd share it anyways. This is a bit more of a first responders post, but my uncle was responding to a call EMS to the scene where police officers were at a local school in the summer because of a breaking and entering. Him and his buddy hightail it to the scene as the officers notify dispatch of severe blood loss of suspect. Now this is not a shooting. This is much worse. They arrive and find the police officers trying to pin this guy down. Still roughly has been about 3 to 5 minutes. Suspect took a piece of the glass from the window. He broke and slices deep muscle and fatty tissue showing into his inner thigh. Now they get here and rush over to help restrain him. This guy grabs the piece of glass. Also he has no pants on and slices his open. Which cuts one of his testicles out, and he picks it up and throws it at one of the police officers, and it hits him in the face. After the officer learned what was thrown at him, he threw up plenty of times for obvious reasons. They got the guy to the hospital and found out he had THC, shrooms, meth and LSD in his system. Guy does not remember a single thing of it. Not a stupid call, just thought I'd share it. So sorry if someone gets upset over that. I just want to know how the guy felt waking up in a hospital missing his testicle and having severe surgery done to his leg along with a load of stitches. Edit stupid story for EMS in this edit should have done this one first. I guess uncle responds to a guy who's getting arrested for speeding and some other charge might have been a warrant or something. The guy fakes passing out and protocol is to call EMS. EMS arrives and finds nothing wrong with the guy besides him being unresponsive. They get him in the ambulance and are talking to him knowing he's listening about how this is a waste of time, just wake up, this is a bunch of BS, etc. The other paramedic in the back is done. He knows this guy is bullshitting them, so he just grabs one of his nipples and twists, and the guy immediately shoots up screaming. If you're genuinely passed out, it takes a minute for your body to respond to pain if it does at all. But yeah, that's all I have for now. Story 40 I accidentally dialed 911 3 times in one day. The cop had to come to the dog salon to respond to the call. Even though it was just me again, oops, I actually crawled behind a display into the lunchroom to escape because he was so pissed on his way in. We had to dial 9, then the prefix 14, but this certain phone changed 4 to 1 every time. All the phones looked the same. We had 4, so I wasn't the first or last to do this, sorry. Story 41 Not a cop. I was the caller on one of these recently. We have a crazy neighbor lady. She hates kids playing outside and constantly harassed my son about it. One day my son 8 and his friend were playing soccer outside and she took their ball and wouldn't give it back. My son comes to get me. She gives me 10 minutes of verbal abuse about what a dad I am, that I let my son play outside, it's a lovely day and they're playing in safe grass area in our safe subdivision. Tells me he'd be better being adopted. I'm being super patient with her, but she refuses to return the ball. Eventually she says you'll have to call the police to get it back. So I do. I call the local police station and am super embarrassed, but I explain to the cop on the phone that Mary won't give my son's ball back. Cop obviously knows her because he says put her on. I hand her the phone, she goes completely silent and just listens for 30 seconds, says nothing, hands me back the phone, gives my son the ball and walks away. She hasn't bothered him since. Story 42 Obligatory Not a cop, but when I was a kid, my mom called the cops because she heard popping sounds she thought were gunshots in our garage. She rushed my brother and I into the car in the driveway and waited for the cops. Turns out, she forgot a case of Diet 7-Up in our garage and the popping noises were the cans exploding. Story 43 I happen to know that my former neighbor called 911 several times because a dog belonging to someone in the area kept getting loose and the animal control office was closed. I mean, he was a nice dog, but he just kept getting loose and running around, and he was hard to catch when he got it into his head that everybody was just playing chase, but the dog catcher was usually able to handle it, so maybe it was a case of dumb 911 caller and dumb dog owner. Story 44 Perp here, had keg toss with 3 friends, muddy, raining, 2 a.m. No, make that 3 a.m., cops called, we protested that we weren't making excessive noise, was private property, and officer offered to act as line judge for final round of death if we agreed to keep our mouths shut, protecting and serving. Story 45 Not a cop, but our neighbors when I was a kid once called the police on us because we refused to be social with them. Like the police showed up at our house, they were invited in, sat down, offered drinks and given the very long list of offenses that lead to the silent treatment. The list ranged from property damage and animal abuse, to domestic and they agreed that we probably shouldn't speak to these people. Yes, we called and reported each of these incidents and they had been dealt with to the point that we had officers sitting on the street watching the house. Story 46 Well, one time as a kid, one of our cats decided to go and stand on my mom's cell phone. She wound up calling 911, and my mom had to stand there and explain that our cat was the one that dialed and it was an honest mistake. No cops were sent. Story 47 The overwhelming majority of calls for service are what civilians would view as a waste of time. However, most officers recognize that not every call will end in an arrest. Therefore, Many just consider the less eventful calls to be another part of their job and generally don't consider them to be a waste of time. After all, officers get paid the same regardless as to whether they are hunting down murderers or responding to a heated confrontation about Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Off the top of my head, here are just a few of the more trivial calls I've seen sworn units respond to at the agency I work at. Example 1: complaint of suspicious person at a place of business in reference to a woman lumbering about near a parking lot. Person of concern was gone on arrival. Example 2: pretty much any suspicious package ever. Example 3: complaint of threats in reference to a person threatening to steal feral cats whom the complainant fed on occasion, but did not actually own or provide primary care for. Example 4: complaint of criminal mischief in reference to the complainant finding coffee splattered on their car door. Example 5: animal control complaint in reference to a squirrel that appeared to be injured. Squirrel was gone on arrival. Example 6: complaint of vehicle theft in reference to the complainant's belief his vehicle was stolen from a parking garage. Vehicle was located on the bottom floor of the garage, which, apparently, was where the complainant had forgotten he had left it. Think you guys get the point here.